Our last speaker is Professor Michael Niemann. He's with the International Studies program at Southern Oregon University, and he's going to put some context on this by talking about the consequences of 20 years of the North American Free Trade Agreement. Thank you, Michael.
Oh, thanks, Herb. Well, I'm glad that I had a chance to be in here. The Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement is just the latest of a series of developments that really started in the 1970s. And it has often been called globalization, but a better name for it would really be the internationalization of governmental powers. And so, when NAFTA was inaugurated on New Year's Day 1994, we were promised all kinds of good things. President Clinton promised good jobs, 2 million good jobs within 5 years that would be created. Now we have a 20-year history, and we know that none of these things that were promised actually came true. And to give you some background here, in the latest analysis, the Economic Policy Institute in December 2013 basically stated that in 20 years, 700,000 jobs have been lost. And 60% of those jobs were actually manufacturing jobs. NAFTA turned what was essentially a balanced trade between Mexico and the United States into a large trade deficit. In December 2012, that trade deficit with Mexico amounted to $100 billion. So the primary beneficiaries of NAFTA on the US side were corporations, corporate farmers, corporations who were able to relocate their production facilities to Mexico or threaten their workers with doing so and thus extracting concessions from those workers. On the Mexican side, things were equally bad. For ordinary Mexicans, life got worse. Before NAFTA, Mexico was basically self-sufficient in staple foods. In the years between 1998 and 2007, and those are the era when free trade for agricultural goods were implemented, there were about 2 million farmers who were driven off the land in Mexico by cheap corn that's subsidized by US taxpayers. The majority of those farmers ended up having to look for work in the United States because the Mexican economy was not able to absorb that much freed up labor. At the same time, food prices in Mexico did not go down, they actually exploded. So that in that same period, the price of tortillas and white bread increased by almost 700%. So today, Mexican middle-class families pay a much larger percentage of their income on food than either in the United States or in Canada. Mexican workers also learned that US investment was at best temporary. In the 6 months after the dot-com bubble burst in 2000, 600,000 manufacturing jobs left Mexico for places with even cheaper labor costs. So the maquiladoras industries in northern Mexico are now only a fraction of what they used to do at the beginning of NAFTA. So NAFTA was a bad deal for all those countries involved. But what made NAFTA even worse was not so much the trade effects, because that's bad in and of itself, but it actually pioneered a brand new way in which investors could bypass national courts and directly access an unelected ad hoc tribunal consisting of 3 people. One of those persons would be actually appointed by the company, by the investor, by the corporation who was claiming to have been heard by laws and regulations. Since 1998, 80 cases have been brought to the NAFTA and similar tribunals in the other free trade organizations, treaties. Of these 80 cases, 20 have been dismissed. That meant the government won. 13 cases have been won by corporations, leading to over $400 million in compensation being paid to those corporations. And the other 47 are still pending. So we don't know yet how they will turn out. And the majority of these cases are not about basic trade issues, stuff moving from here to there. The majority of those cases involve environmental, public health, land use, and similar regulatory actions undertaken by cities, by states, provinces, and by national governments. I want to just give you two examples. In 1999, Methanex, a Canadian manufacturer of cancer-causing compound MTBE, sued the United States for almost $1 billion because California had banned the use of that compound in gasoline. Now, in that particular tribunal case, the U.S. prevailed, and the Canadian corporation had to pay $4 million in legal costs. But in 1997, 2 years earlier, a U.S. corporation, Metalclad, won almost $60 million from Mexico because the town of Guadalcazar refused to grant them a permit to create a toxic waste dump. So that's sort of two examples of how these extrajudicial, extraterritorial tribunals supersede national courts and legislation. So what is at stake for all of us here in the United States and all of our brothers and sisters at the Pacific Rim is really the essence of democracy and our rights to determine our laws and regulations, and that they not be superseded by an unelected international tribunal. And so there are people who believe that investors need protection. There are people that believe that they need more protection than ordinary citizens. They believe that corporations are the underdog in this wild world, and that they need more protection and support. And so we sometimes fall into the trap of thinking that these people are greedy, mean, and monsters, whatever. They're actually trapped in a system, in a vision of the world that is so narrow that they cannot even conceive of people relating to each other on the basis of something other than the things they are. And so the struggle against fast track, the struggle against the TPP is also a struggle to liberate us and them from this narrow vision of the world in which people do not relate to each other as human beings, but relate to each other as sellers of things. And so that's one of the reasons why we call on Representative Walden, Senator Wyden, and Senator Merkley to stop the fast-track legislation and to subject this treaty to the proper democratic scrutiny that it deserves. Thank you.